So today, where I'd really like for us to kind of spend some time thinking about, and I really feel like the last several weeks have led into this really well. But I don't know if you have heard this, but 2020 has been a rough year. Um, it's been, I'm not saying that good things haven't come out of it. And I think each of us could list positives that we've seen in the midst of it. And I think of it kind of like, you see this beautiful flower and then you realize it's growing up out of the middle of a garbage heap. Uh, and it feels like in some ways I've spent a lot of this year looking for the flowers in the garbage heap in a much more distinct way than I have in past years. And just based on what I see on the internet and what I see on social media and amongst my friends talking and stuff, it seems to me that that's relatively common for a lot of folks, is that this year has been particularly rough, right? So what I'd like to start with, and I'm going to start with the easy one, and actually there might even be one easier, but the pandemic has just been brutal. um, we all know people who have been impacted by it or have died from it. We all have seen job loss. We have all seen people struggling to make ends meet. We all know people who right now are probably or are about to lose benefits because things didn't get signed in time. And the pandemic has created problems for depression, anxiety, social distancing. For my extroverted friends, this has probably been particularly complicated. Um, or if you're single, it makes it even more complicated. And the list just goes on, and it's just a huge domino effect that the pandemic has had on each of us, on all of us. And what I want to do, and this is kind of goes into Amanda's teaching on lamenting a little bit, is I want to take a few moments and let everyone have an opportunity to just name some of the crap, some of the icky stuff, some of the stuff that has been difficult this year, whether it's for you individually or it's a statement about our current community, our neighborhoods, our cities, our states, our country, our world. But I just want to give everyone an opportunity that would like to just share some of the things that have been heavy in 2020.
I'll start. I think one of the biggest issues we dealt with this year was just the virus itself. Like how everybody was kind of treating things between the science and politics of how to work with things. They even tried to make a little change, where you got people who throw politics about they shouldn't be wearing a mask, where other people would talk about they got sick with COVID even before that and would presuming they'll be better, but like the statistics will even told you like even if it's exaggerated, like a lot of people died for this whole thing. So I think this year is just the adaptation of everything um, that really got us to. I mean, I don't think understand would be a fair word, but I think that's the one thing that's been the real challenge with everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Somebody else?
I can share one of the struggles that I've had over the years being not being able to see my grandmother over in Jersey.
Mm.
Just not being able to make that trip out there. She's never met Meadow. Really want her to meet Meadow because she can't travel. About 95 now. She just got into a car accident, making a turn like 1 block away from home, and airbags were deployed, so she's a little in bad shape now, but he's still trucking. But every time I talk to her, she's saying, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm done. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
just hang in there for a couple more months till we can get out there. You can see Meadow a little bit.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll be able to do a trip in the new year. But that's just been a downer, not being able to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Glenn. That's tough. Anybody else? Go ahead, Tally.
There's a lot of stress in my industry. Um, Even where there's not uncertainty, but I mean, there's definitely still uncertainty, but even like in my personal company where nobody got furloughed and nobody left, well, people left, people took early retirement and stuff like that. There's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of stress, and it's already a pretty high stress job, so it just feels a lot different. And then the added stress of, you know, being dissuaded from and or choosing to not, you know, go out to dinner with your crew or whatever after you finish, you know, that's kind of like one of the bright spots is if you're with a crew you really like, and you're going somewhere that you really like, then, you know, you can all hang out together in someplace cool. And so even though it's long working hours and the public can be really difficult, you have that, you know, but we don't have that anymore. So yeah, so it's just really stressful. Really stressful, and it's felt very thoroughly. So even though, like, for me personally, I do okay, I feel like at shaking it off and acknowledging it and being able to still not have it really affect me, that it's what's more stressful to me is that felt stress amongst everyone collectively, you know.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, someone posted something in chat. Amanda did. It said this year it really hit home how terrible a system it is that healthcare is tied to employment and is so expensive. I've since spent some really scary times over the last few months because I have no medication for diabetes, and I've got some major dental issues where my mouth has been hurting, sensitive for a month now. I'm so angry with McConnell and Trump and all of the compassionless power mongering. Thank you, Amanda. Anyone else?
Okay, I got something to add, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I think one of the biggest challenges I had to deal with is, and I'll just bring this into the room, it's the racism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for me being black, you know, like throughout the whole 2020, you know, it was indeed one of the biggest challenges to be around, because, you know, a lot of people would, you know, will speak of how important the black community is versus how the black community should be acting. And though there was times that I didn't want anything to do with it, I still get dragged back in from all of the melodrama that, you know, that me, and let alone a lot of us black folks, had to deal with, you know, like, and for me to survive, you know, this whole while, you know, like most of the time, you know, I'm sure everybody was at the hospital throughout, you know, throughout the summer. I had to see a lot of my, a lot of people in the community, you know, just get their ass whooped. And if it's not one thing out of the other, but I can only speak for myself for the fact that, you know, I had to watch this either in horror or in courage, because, you know, whether it's I have to march for more rights for us folks, or I had to live my life independently as this human being, instead of just seeing myself as just you know, this part of the crowd. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this year was a definite challenge for us to even become one. But yet, you know, everybody's always on that versus mode. Everybody has to go against the grain. So, and so yeah, that's just the way I feel it. And it looks like Daryl's raising his hand highly. So I'll let him speak if he has something to say.
Did you have something, Darnell?
No, I was just listening.
All right.
Oh,
Anybody
then
else?
hi.
Anybody else have anything they want to share about this year?
Well,
I think for me, I want to echo a lot of what's already been previously said. One of my big frustrations was politicizing a public health issue. Just unbelievable how we are so non-sympathetic to people suffering from severe health issues. Also challenges at work. I had to let people go at work. So that's been challenging, having to basically pivot and recreate my job. That's been challenging. And the other part is that, I have a son who lives in Kansas City, Missouri. It's hard for me to see him the way it is, and this has increased that challenge. Generally, I would be leaving today actually to go to his home in Kansas City because we usually go there between Christmas and New Year's. And this year, that's obviously not going to be an option. And then lastly, it's just dealing with people who are in denial that this is actually an issue. I have family members who act like it's not a big deal. Sue has family members who have basically taken the blue pill. And
Her erectile dysfunction?
No, Don.
Oh, different blue pill.
Yeah, that's a different challenge. but never mind. I was going to say something not so good. So thanks for making me laugh. So there are so many challenges that so many people are facing, and it seems like the perfect storm of challenges between the politics. It's exacerbated people's where their sympathies lie or where they don't lie. It seems to have amplified that whole aspect of their persona.
Yeah.
So it's multiplied and brought out either the worst or best in people.
Yeah. Thank you. Darnell, what'd you have?
yeah, I was gonna say, this year it's been hard for me, with the pandemic and all, because I feel like I was like just beginning to like fall in love with dust, and then you guys got taken from me. So it was real hard. I've never done that on like Zoom online. So just to try it and still love it because it's still the same people, it was an experience. And the racism that Quentin mentioned, which I had no idea that would come up because a few people that know me kind of know how I feel about that. But just when it comes to the racism, it was hard involving that because with my living situations, I don't know what word is commonly used, but I'm going to use the word that I know. I went from one slumlord to another. And then what was going on in the whole world with the racism or whatnot, it was, with the second one, it hurted me a whole lot to where I almost wanted to just cut myself off from the other race.
Yeah.
Like just including everybody. But I told myself, I mean, I can't. I mean, love is love. And you guys like showed me what it really was. So it was real hard to deal with. And you guys were there for me to help me through that second one. But it was just real hard because, I mean, the few people that know me like personally know racism is like one of the things I wish never existed.
Of course.
So I got, you know what I'm saying, you guys, well, look, I got you guys that love me, then I got other people that don't. It just sent me to a real confusion, and it just hurted a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I guess that was all I probably wanted to share. Because talking about racism kind of makes me blank out. Like I'm sure I wanted to say more, but yeah,
All right. Well,
it was a hard year.
if you think of more, Darnell, feel free to hop back in.
Okay.
If I could share real quick, Don.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
So, yeah, I think from like a global perspective, I think everyone's kind of touched on it. The frustration that humanity just didn't step up to the plate. And then I think maybe from a more micro viewpoint, and I've been like reflecting a lot about this since Amanda's teaching around lament, but I think I'm just lamenting everything that I feel like was stolen from me in 2020. And that's just been weighed heavily. Like I feel time was stolen from me. I feel loved ones were, and I don't know. That just keeps kind of bouncing around in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
I have one more thing, if I could.
Please.
David saying, feeling as though things were stolen from him sort of made me think of how, for me, I lament that Ruby's first year at TSA couldn't be in person, and just the difficulty, especially that Trish has had in school this year, and that hits me really hard. Oh, there's Ruby.
Hi, Ruby.
So, yeah, definitely like lamenting what could have been, had they had their in-person school experience this year, the both of them. So
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a
go ahead. Go ahead, Tana.
Thanks. Since everybody, I feel like, everybody covered all the very more serious subjects pretty well. So I'm going to share sort of like lower level loss. I just miss going out and sitting in coffee shops to work. Like, I'm pretty okay being a homebody most of the time. I'm way more okay with being stuck at home than a lot of people are. So I think that overall, like the pandemic, solitude part of the pandemic has affected me less than, a lot of people. So I'm, I don't want to complain too much, but yeah, I just like, sometimes I just like being around people, like not necessarily interacting with them, but just like knowing they're there. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. And then just something else, I had told Don at one point, I was like, I feel like everybody needs a cheerleader, but nobody has the energy to be the cheerleader. And then I read something, someone said that kind of explained it better than that, where they said, everybody needs more than anyone else can be right now. And that statement has just stuck with me because, hey, kitty cat. So like, we all need so much, but we're all in the same, not the same boat. I don't want to say that. That's not right. But like, everybody's experiencing some kind of stress to a certain degree from this pandemic. And so it's like, there's not a lot of people out there who are like, woohoo, I'll take on the role and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it's just, that's just sitting with me about this sort of collective mourning and the collective lack of people being able to be the helpers everyone needs.
Yeah. Thank you. Quentin, did you have something else?
Yeah. It's my mom. Like I know everybody, knows like I love my mom, and she only lives like a couple blocks away, back at home. And for me to not have contact with her, like the way I'm used to, it was like a really really harsh challenge given the circumstance, where I'm like one of the only family members that can actually see her, within that proximity. And over the summer before I went to the hospital, like when they did the one of the window visitations, and I think one of the visits, I remember singing "Take on Me" to my mom, and it was like right in front of a few other patients, right in front of the nursing home she was at, and all I remember is my mom laughing and crying at the same time. And like if she literally was outside, she would have just told me like, "Hush, child, just hush." But but otherwise, like it's been heartbreaking just to see her in in such condition. And and then I told her like the next time we definitely visit, it's just me and her and a whole bunch of Fruit Loops, because that's her favorite cereal. And so I'm definitely expecting 2021 to be a different chapter.
Yeah, thank you. So if anyone else has some, feel free to jump in. I just want to share quickly, when I think back over my year, throughout my life, particularly in my childhood, I've had some rough years in my life. And many of you can, relate to that. But when I think about what all seems to be independent situations converging, when I think back to my childhood, it was one situation that was just a constant, right? And in some ways, the pandemic is getting there, but this year was really interesting. Whether it be the protests and the marching that Quentin and Darnell referenced with racism, and then even some of the experience that Lee and I had during one of the marches, where we experienced the conflict with the police. And I think about just my health has been bad throughout the year. Finally confronting my parents, a video of me not at my finest moment going viral, and needing to go on sabbatical. Just there, my year when I look back, and that doesn't even include the things that we've all experienced, such as, the uncertainty and the conflict in everything being politicized and everyone being pitted against each other politically, emotionally, and just the name calling, the vitriol, just no matter where you turned, it felt this year there was just another thing to endure or encounter. Now, I realize that in some ways this speaks of my privilege, right? This speaks of the privilege of being able to stay above or away from all of that stuff, and other people haven't had the advantage of being able to avoid, whether it be racism, whether it be gender discrimination, whether it be health issues and stuff like that, right? So but 2020, I think, has created a strange phenomenon in this decade, this generation, in that this will always be remembered as a terrible, terrible year by everyone. Even if your year ended up okay, I still think most people would reflect and look at this. I think what's really important to me is, Tana and I were talking yesterday, and we spent a lot of hard work over the last couple years working on rereading the text in a manner that looks at how is Scripture addressing inequities, how is Scripture addressing oppression, and what is our role in reading the text, and how do we read it in a manner that is genuine to what our station in life is, and then how we are to care for or stand up to empire or oppressors or whatever it might be. And I think all of that was extremely valuable, and that will always be a part of who we are. But one of the things that I think happened in the midst of 2020 that is kind of hindsight is 2020. Thank God, right? We can finally actually all say that on January 1st, we can say hindsight is literally 2020. But I think a mistake that I made as the pastor of Dust is that we didn't spend enough time talking about how to cope, how to survive, how to thrive, how to live in such a way that counters things like the year 2020. I think we had those moments, don't get me wrong. I think we had gatherings or conversations around what it is that we can do to stand up for our neighbor and care for those around us who are suffering uniquely more than we are or something. But I don't think we actually talked about and set up a theology of health for ourselves. And when I say that a mistake I made, I'm not sitting here beating myself up. So no one needs to send me any kind of pat on the back and be like, "Oh, it's okay, Don." Like I'm not beating myself up over this. What I am saying though is that I think what's going to be important for us in 2021 is what happens. How do we know what the text calls us to do and be and believe about ourselves and to believe about God in the midst of chaos and tragedy and complicated times? And then how do we not just survive those moments, but find ways to thrive in those moments? And I think that's going to be really important for us as we move into 2021. The end of the year is actually nothing more significant than a calendar date, right? And we get Ryan Seacrest. So calendar date and Ryan Seacrest. That's it. There's nothing else important about December 31st. But I think it is a good moment just set up by our calendar for us to pause for a moment, reflect on the year, and think forward. There's always a moment. There's a moment for I've started to read your message. There's always but I do think this is an important moment. So here's the other thing that we have to recognize. December 31st at midnight is not a magical incantation. I know, Tally, I'm sorry. But January 1st, 2021 is still going to be just as big of a mess as December 31st, 2020. And so my question is, how do we have conversations and how do we think about church and faith? Because I know a lot of people that their faith got shook during this. Like their faith journey, their understanding of God, and just even their desire to participate in faithful discussions diminished greatly. Whether that's Zoom fatigue or something, or just the overwhelming anxiety and depression and difficulties that they face in the year, that they can't do the work of church also. They can't do the work of believing in faith also. So the next question I have for you, and what I'm doing is I'm making a list. I'm not checking it twice that day's passed. But I am making a list of the things that we all struggled with this year. And I also want to make a list on this question because I want it to inform our teaching team. Hint, hint, whoever out there is listening. I want it to help inform our teaching team about the things that we need to be planning, thinking about, discussing, and leading in our community. So, my next question is, what are the flowers that you saw this year that bloomed up through the trash heaps? What are the things that you saw that came to life even in the worst possible conditions? So what are some of those things? Go ahead, Quentin.
Prosperity.
Can you say more about that?
Prosperity. I think that's what literally my point. The period of the whole entire paragraph of my 2020, because it all started chaotic. I mean, like, especially how Kobe Bryant died.
Mm.
Like I mean, for me, not being much of a basketball fan, but knowing him as this humanitarian, kind of, it did strike me like a few times of just sitting down and just figure out, like, what philosophies should I look over? Because like every year on my Facebook, I do a year in review. So I do choose like a word that literally describes everything that I went through. And I think prosperity is an important one because, like, for me being in a hospital again and, dealing with my foot the way I did, it had been a whole entirely different because thankfully, like I didn't have to have anything amputated or, removed or anything like that. So it just led to me to realize, despite the failure, it showed my preparedness, especially my self-care at that given moment. Because if I was standing at my friend's house and bleeding, and, having like all this bad things happen to me, things would have gotten worse, but I prospered.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Amanda said, "This is selfish, but ... Even before the pandemic, I felt isolated because I'm not in Toledo with y'all. With the pandemic, I still felt isolated, but I also felt that I wasn't alone now in the loneliness for others. It brought a sense of community to me that we were all now having to do church via Zoom." I don't think that's selfish at all. I actually was speaking with a pastor in Manhattan this past week, and he called me up because they're going to try and replicate the things that we do when we're live, with the meeting owl and dialogical gatherings and stuff. And we were talking about how the pandemic has made us so aware of people that are isolated. And so I don't think that's selfish at all. I think it makes sense. I think also the other thing that it does is I hope that when Dust goes live again, not that we're not live at the moment, but in person, that those of us who have the privilege of gathering with each other don't lose sight of the people that log on. I think that we were probably much more likely to take care of online issues since we're all online than maybe we were beforehand. And I think it created an awareness. So no, I think the isolation and having company in that is comforting in a strange, peculiar way that we all feel. So, anybody else?
What was your original question?
Where are the things, Darnell, that you have seen that are beautiful, that rose up through the junk or the crap of 2020, but still managed to, bloom?
Well, my very first thought was that I've spoken to a lot of people who says they haven't always been aware of what's been going on when it comes to the racial issue in the world.
Yes.
And me personally, I notice a lot of Caucasian people like talking to me now. I don't know if it's all because of what happened with George Floyd or whatnot, but to me, it was very enlightening and comforting to hear people like acknowledge it. And I believe there was even a session about it before with Dust while you were gone, just about the whole thing. And it makes me feel good. Like you want to learn
Yeah.
and that you're interested in wanting to make a change.
Yeah.
So to me, that was
Absolutely.
like positive throughout all the darkness.
I agree. Excellent. Thank you, Darnell. Amanda said, I also am so grateful for family and friends whose generosity and thoughtfulness saw our family through this time. Even if people couldn't help financially, we had so much sympathy from folks. Yeah. I think there is, Tana kind of backed away from the statement of we're all in the same boat, because we might all be in the same storm, but we definitely all have different qualities of boats that we're enduring the storm in. But I do think everyone being in the same storm does raise people's sympathy and empathy for others in the storm that are struggling. Anybody else?
For me, like one of the flowers popping up would be in my piano lessons that I teach. The students, we took a break when the first part of it was completely nothing, and then gradually a few students started coming back, some of them in person with masks, some over Zoom. And like, sometimes I wonder, like, is the time I put into that, is it worthwhile as it impacts my family? And with the pandemic, somebody has to watch the girls, and then there's less people able to help watch the girls so I can teach. But it's just been really striking to me to like realize that like this is like a highlight for these kids' weeks. And there's been weeks where they've shown up, and a few weeks ago, like I had 4 lessons in a row, and 3 out of 4 of the kids either cried or were on the verge of tears. And it wasn't anything that I did, I know that, but it was like me asking them to do anything remotely, just like broke them. Or when they weren't able to play something as well as they practiced it. And like, I just feel so grateful to be like in this position, and like to have been exposed to ideas in my teaching over the years that I feel capable of creating like a safe place for these kids. And that to me is such a privilege, and I'm just like, it's just definitely flowers. Like I have more purpose now in teaching them, knowing that like I'm creating a safe place for them to be, and to be encouraged, and to embrace making mistakes, and to navigate difficult emotions. That goes all this much beyond just what's a quarter note and what's a half note. So I've been really like appreciating that and thankful to have that opportunity to create that space. Because one of my philosophies as a teacher is the Maya Angelou quote about people will forget what you say, but they won't forget how you made them feel. It's such an integral part of teaching. So I just feel grateful and happy and more purpose around that part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Tally, did you have something?
I did. I thought of one thing, and I'll say that in a second, but then also I saw myself for a second and I was like, oh my gosh, I did chess and it was awesome. And the group of us who got together to do that through this, and still taking all the precautions very seriously, and there were a few theater companies around the country who endeavored some productions, and a lot of people got ill because they didn't do it safely. They didn't wear masks because, you have to see your face to be able to do a show and stuff like that. And we managed to take the precautions seriously, do some things that they let us do, and that a few of us were able to take off our masks on stage, still with our socially distanced blocking, and did the whole thing, and not not a cast member got sick, not an audience member got sick. And it was so enriching for us as a cast, you know. I know it seems like not a big deal, I think, to most people, but it was a really big deal to us. It's silly that I'm crying over it, but
I don't think it's silly. I think
this is
it's
really special.
yeah.
It's hard to describe because, yeah, it's just really hard to describe. I'm very thankful for the experience, and it's just when you are the kind of artist who generally collaborates and then something like this happens, and you know, because even for me, a lot of the different things that I do are all collaborations. There's not much that I do that's solitary because I prefer to collaborate. So to have that, the prospect of that to be completely gone, and then have this little, you know, this bit of hope and this beauty that we were able to create, it was really special. But then also our just my family. I think that if you were to look at us on paper, you might think that we would not fare well through the pandemic, as in me and my husband and my kids. Like, we have got a little bit of a strenuous past, you know, because of different childhood trauma for us and things like that. And I just feel really thankful that we were able to, like, the amount of growth that we've achieved since becoming a family, as in since I married David over 16 years before the pandemic started, was enough that we actually, I feel like we're not only surviving during the pandemic as a family emotionally, but thriving. And
Yeah.
I feel very blessed about that, because I know that a lot of people weren't in that same situation for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't get to where we got yet. It's an undue amount of stress that people's relationships have been put under.
Yeah.
So for me, it just seems against the odds that we were able to, you know, put in enough work for those first 16 years to be able to not just barely get by this year, but you know, I would say do better and be closer and more healthy than we ever have before. So I'm super thankful for that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go. So just go, because it seems to pair well with Tally's. Just talking about like the work you put in. Like, I think my hardest thing with 2020 has been that this hasn't been really that terrible of a year for me. Like, I mean, you know, part of me enjoys staying home and doing puzzles and reading books and being solitary. And it's like, oh, good. Now I have a reason to tell people, no, I don't want to go out for a beer or for dinner, because, like, that's just not my preferred way to socialize. And I've had to, and this year has nudged me to spend more time outside, which is something I love and don't often do without a lot of prompting or nudging. And so, like, I feel like I was already predisposed to fare well with the challenges of 2020 and the COVID. And I really like how Tally put it. Like, something I think I've underestimated is like how much work I've put into myself in the past few years. Like, you know, trying to be positive about things and to look on the bright side of things, and like especially with depression. And I think something that's almost positive about, if not outright nice about the COVID, is that like it is like utterly beyond my control. Like, I can't play some mind game to be like, well, this part's sort of your fault, or maybe if you had done this differently. It's like, oh, I like, this is like, there's no way I could blame myself for a lot of the difficulties in 2020.
Yeah.
but yeah, like I have put in a lot of work to be like, what's a good way to view this? What's another way I can view this time and to have a healthy outlook on a negative situation? And yeah, and like we were talking earlier about things we struggle with, and something like I would say that like yeah, that 2020 has not been really much more difficult than a normal year for me. And part of me has felt bad that I haven't been able to help my friends more. Um, and I think someone touched on this in the beginning, like we can't get everything from someone. And like I've had to, I guess, be judicious about which friends I want to support, and also like there's been a lot of barriers to supporting my friends, and just being able to like how do I um, respect my friends and support them with the barriers and whatnot in place, and how do I take risks that are both for my friends and for myself, whether it's with COVID or just in life in general, that are acceptable and worth like that are worth the growth. Like I went to Long Island for a wedding, which was a risk. I knew the wedding would be outside. I knew we would have to be masked for the wedding. I knew it was gonna be like fairly small. Um, and I knew, and for me, that risk was acceptable because I knew there would be a lot of healing if I went, like both with my friends and with family. And I think I'm kind of getting to the rambling part. So I don't know. 2020 has been good because I've had to, like, it has not been much more challenging than a regular year for me, and I don't know. It's been nice in some ways to know, like, oh wow, like I'm a lot stronger than I thought.
Yeah. Thank you. Wade?
Yeah, I guess, often I see the bright spots when I look at other people, and it's harder to see them in my own. But I'll take it. The I think the only like my reluctance to share is because I don't want to be like, oh well, here's the silver lining for you. Um, to see something bright in someone else's life in a year like this, to tell them that can seem to diminish all of the other, like you're not taking into account that. But so a couple things. So like for Don, before the pandemic, we got to go see our friend get ordained or commissioned or something in a Mennonite church in Indiana. But the whole drive out there was basically Don's ruse to work up the courage to come out as Pan. And so having that drive with him, but more importantly, having him be able to be, more open about himself and not have it be something of shame or something that needed to be secret. So, so that was good. Also, in the summer, he realized through a family interaction that his sister had been believing lies about him, and his sister's family had been as well, and he was able to finally kind of speak his truth there. David losing his dad, but then having in the midst of a pandemic to be able to switch a job to spend less time with handling crises at work, and to be able to move into a new house with his family and to be able to spend more time with them. And Trish, just being able to be honest with her family and friends about herself. I just think, all those things, would have happened, pandemic or no. And, and I'm sure there was a lot of opportunities missed for all of those people because of the pandemic, but to still be able to kind of make those changes and live into their truth during that was good to see.
Thanks, Wade. I think that that really strikes at a lot of things, right? That sometimes when our own trash heap doesn't have very many flowers, it's really helpful to be able to look at others and see the flowers that are blooming for them, and that keeps us going. And not only does it keep us going, but it also creates a appreciation for others and what they've endured and what they've encountered, and empathy is created in that space. So thank you, Wade. That's a very important reflection. Anybody else? All right, my last question, and then we will wrap up. And I realized that there was part of me that debated, because I really have missed teaching and coming back and just kind of doing a end of year conversation around what we've experienced, what we hope for, and all that, and not really teaching. I was kind of like, I didn't know if it felt right, but I'm telling you that I'm really excited about the next chapter at Dust, and whether we spend time on these things every week or we divvy it up between other times is yet to be determined. But I do think it's important for us to have this conversation today, so that in the next period of time, the next season for Dust, we can start building theological groundwork for healthiness in the way that we engage each other. I think we've done that. I just don't think it's been as intentional as maybe what I'm hopeful that this will be. Because I think Lee and Tally both mentioned the hard work that we put in that gets you to the point where surviving a pandemic is possible. And I think the same thing's true with church and faith. The hard work that we put in of understanding God, of understanding the text, of understanding the call of the faithful, is what makes us strong as a community, either during a pandemic, zombie apocalypse, whatever it might be. That it's what will see us through, and see us through in a way that not only is healthy for ourselves, but hopefully brings health to others as well. So my last question I have for you guys today is, what changes do you think this year demonstrated that you need to make? Let me begin. One of the things that I realized pretty early on in the pandemic was, financially, it wasn't going to impact Tana and I. And that it pointed out a part of privilege that maybe I didn't fully recognize that I had. That in some ways we were pandemic proof. That doesn't mean that it wasn't going to be complicated with being isolated and socially distanced, but our lives were set up in such a unique way that the impact, and Lee, you kind of touched on this a little bit with what you just said, the impact that we saw around us was not felt in the same way in our household. And one of the changes that recognition has created in me is a sense that I've not arrived, right? Like that there is still a lot of work that I have to do. It's easy when, you've been doing the work of recognizing privilege and racism and sexism and inequity and poverty and doing all that work over a period of time, kind of take your foot off the gas at some point. And it's not because you really believe you've arrived, but you believe that you're far enough along that that it's okay to kind of take the foot off the gas. And I think that this year reminded me and demonstrated to me that I still have work to do. And so a change I need to make is stop coasting. And I realized I think some of my coasting was because of my health and my mental health and my spiritual health. But there's also a piece of this that was also just a decision that I could coast, and I don't want to anymore. And so that's a change that I see in myself. Anybody else?
I think one of the things I do happen to realize is just to change the environment I'm in. Like, I know that I don't, like most of this year, I know I haven't done a lot. When it came down to, like my friends, like, I mean, I'll be a little personal, like how my friends, became toxic from all the psychological, if not physical warfare that we've been, dealing with domestically around the States, where I was bringing all that negativity to me to lead to the point that I wasn't really, I was recklessly not focusing on my health. And, it led me to the hospital. So when I was in there, all I've been doing is like reading, studying up, and just focusing on everything that was at arm's reach. So what I've done, instead of just ridding the toxicity, it's just I pretty much only handle the toxicity I can only be useful for. So when it came down, because I have to realize I have to strike a balance instead of just getting rid of one thing out of the other. That just makes me biased. If I stick to, on 100% positivity, I mean, I will probably not focus on the things that would piss me off. Where, if I don't focus on, the negativity, or if I don't have that, clearly I'm not going to be myself. So all I did was balance the toxicity instead of just having one thing going to be over the other.
Yep.
So so for next year, like, I think that's my next adventure, especially now, me and my girl, we could learn to strike a balance.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? I think another one for me is that I need church and I want to share my faith. And, that sounds weird to say that, right? As the pastor, that I need church and I want to share my faith, that should be a given. But there's a part of me again that I think just over the years, it was easy to just take church for granted. And because I've watched how people have harmed other people through evangelism and sharing their faith, I had really backed away from some of those conversations in different settings. And after the pandemic and all the racism and all the violence and all the protests and all the vitriol and hatred between political parties, I just realized how much faith can create a space of healing and continuity and community that is just sorely lacking in our public discourse. And it just has really made me realize how much I kind of let some of that go by the wayside. Like, I want to see dust grow. I want to invite more people into this space to find healing and faithfulness and beauty and safety. And I just desire that deeply, and that's a change I need to make. Well, we only have a moment or two until we do our prayer requests, so if someone has some, I would love for you to speak up, but no pressure, because these are things that we're going to be continuing to be talking about, and you can always message me if either it's something you don't want to say publicly or it's something that you just don't have the words for at the moment.
So I think what I want to get back to, I suppose, is achieving my inner peacefulness. I feel like it's something I worked really hard on for a couple of years, and maybe 2 years ago, I was really satisfied with where I was at, both emotionally, spiritually, etc. And I feel like I've just really lost that this last year, and just for 2021, getting back to that peace of not letting negative emotions rule my train of thought, of just finding better balance. So I feel like there's a lot that kind of goes into that, but I feel like that slipped away from me as the year went along this year, and that's something I want to build back for 2021.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Anybody else? Lee, I saw you unmuted your mic. Is that...
Yeah, just thinking about, like, I don't know how much I've learned this year, as much as this year has reinforced things I've already learned, like either just casually or deeply, like that hard things that the situation's only temporary, and maybe temporary is 12 months, but it just realizing that someday we will in some way move on. And then also this idea of like accepting a new normal, like for at least for this, like for the season, like accepting a new normal during COVID, like, and it reinforces the lessons that it's okay to be limited. It's okay to need to spend all day in bed, or it's okay to need others. And in some ways, like I feel like I have had, like going back to what Tally said, like having to spend a lot of time on myself, like I've had to learn a lot of things I think are countercultural, and this year's just really enforced a lot of it. I think a lot, like in some ways I see people struggling or acknowledging these cultural expectations that are unrealistic, like that we do have limitations, and that it's okay to not be well, and And also like something I think I've seen people struggle with this year, which is something I've continually trying to learn, is just like, how do we acknowledge assumptions we have that aren't true, and what do we do when assumptional, like foundational thoughts of how life is get challenged? How do we deal with the challenge that we can't fly and can't travel and can't go to restaurants, and that we can't visit our friends, and that you know and like also during all these challenges that are like all these other challenges, how do we still seek self-improvement? Like how am I grateful for how I've grown and still desire to grow more in a realistic manner?
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Amanda said, watching James get so much purpose and meaning out of volunteering at the food pantry has rekindled my desire to give back to a cause. Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, before we stop recording, let me just pray. And then we'll do prayer requests. And I just want to encourage everyone, please continue to send me things on these 3 questions. The 3 questions, in case you don't remember, are what were the hardest things about this year? What came to life in the midst? What are the flowers in the trash heap? And what changes do you need to make? So let me pray. Lord, you are good, and this year has been uniquely complicated to always remember that for me. I'm thankful for your faithfulness to my family. Lord, I'm thankful that one of the things I was reminded of this year is that your faithfulness to my family is actually faithfulness to the community. That you say to Abraham, I will bless you in order to be a blessing to others. Lord, may we be a people that both in our midst of need are willing to accept the blessings from others, and in our own blessings be willing to share those blessings with those around us. Lord, there's a part of me that would just love to light a match and torch this past year. But in history, it's been in the midst of pandemics, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of war, in the midst of racism and slavery and harm and oppression, that some of the greatest flowers and gardens have come out of those spaces. Lord, may we be like you and be a gardener. May we be a people that take the trash heap and turn it into a space for life and beauty. Lord, I love you. I praise you. I give you all the glory. Amen.